We've got some breaking news to get to. A civil lawsuit has been filed against Jay-Z, saying the rapper raped a 13-year-old girl back in 2000. The suit alleges that Jay-Z, whose real name is Sean Carter, raped the girl after the Video Music Awards alongside Sean Diddy Combs. The victim says she was invited to an after party after being spotted by a limo driver and was then assaulted by both rappers. Jay-Z is calling this a blackmail attempt. He released a statement on social media responding to the lawsuit, and Texas attorney behind the legal action saying in part, these allegations are so heinous in nature, you have made a terrible error in judgment, thinking that all celebrities are the same. I look forward to showing you just how different.
The ongoing case involving Jay-Z, Diddy, and allegations of harassment, bribery, and intimidation is filled with dramatic developments. To grasp the full picture, it's essential to explore the legal actions, accusations, and responses from everyone involved.
Many people and many entities involved. And we're going to follow this evidence wherever it takes us. We will find the silent accomplices. We will expose the enablers who enabled this conduct behind closed doors. We will pursue this matter no matter who the evidence implicates.
That's Tony Busby, a very aggressive plaintiff's attorney from Texas, who's sort of leading the charge in all of these civil suits against P. Diddy. Now, there he says, wherever the evidence goes, whoever gets named gets named. Well, the big name that dropped just recently was Jay-Z. Let's take a look at the allegation from the lawsuit. For those of you who don't recall these allegations, it goes all the way back to September 7th of 2000 at the Video Music Awards after party. Then 13-year-old plaintiff, that's his client, was invited by a limo driver who said she, quote, fit what Diddy was looking for. The plaintiff recognized many celebrities at the party and observed marijuana and cocaine use. The plaintiff began to feel woozy and lightheaded after drinking some of a beverage given to her by a waitress. The plaintiff entered an empty bedroom to lie down for a moment. The room contained only a large bed, no other furniture. Here's where it gets graphic. Soon after, Combs entered the room, along with defendant Carter, that is Jay-Z, and a female celebrity, Celebrity B, who has not been named. Again, this is back in 2000. Combs aggressively approached plaintiff with a crazed look in his eyes, grabbed her and said, "You are ready to party." Combs then threw the plaintiff toward a wall, causing the plaintiff to fall. The plaintiff got up, stumbled, at which point Combs grabbed her again and threw her on the bed. At that point, Carter began removing plaintiff's clothes as she grew more and more disoriented. Plaintiff was held down by Carter as he vaginally raped her while Combs and Celebrity B, that woman, watched. After Carter finished, he stepped back towards the wall. Combs then stepped forward and vaginally raped the plaintiff while Carter and that woman, Celebrity B, watched. Okay, those are the allegations. Let me bring in our special guest, joining me, author and certified mental health counselor who specializes in child abuse, neglect, and trauma, Sharonda Brown. All right, Sharonda, if this allegation is true for a 13-year-old, what type of trauma are we talking about?
And we're talking about extensive trauma. We're talking about frontal lobe issues, temporal lobe issues, where we're talking about memory. We're talking about an increased and
Tony Busby, a well-known attorney representing Jane Doe in this case, has alleged that Jay-Z is funding bogus lawsuits to undermine Diddy's accusers and cast doubt on the claims made against him.
an increase in frustration. We're talking about sensory fragments where you remember sense of smell, you remember everything, every little detail because you're stuck there and you can't progress and you can't move forward. I think there are also other things we have to consider. In studying this case, the alleged victim reported that she, struggles with autism and she had a brain injury. And so when you add those factors in there and she has a history of epilepsy, those things also affect memory. And I think that that's the part that's going to make this pretty challenging. But in the effect that there's some sexual trauma there, there's going to be a lot to pull apart with a case like this.
Okay, now the lawsuit says after the alleged rape, the teen ran from the party and called her dad to come pick her up from a gas station. Chloe Mellis at NBC News spoke to the unnamed accuser and her father in this investigative report.
We rode home in silence. He didn't ask me what happened. He didn't ask me what I did or where I was.
In an interview with NBC News, her father said he could not verify the claims. Quote, I felt like I would remember that, and I don't. I have a lot going on, but I mean, that's something that would definitely stick in my mind, he said. When we asked the woman about the contradictions in a phone interview on Friday, she said that she stands by her statements. I have made some mistakes, she said. Honestly, what is the clearest is what happened to me.
Okay, Sharonda, what are your thoughts about the latest statements from the accuser and from her father, who was, according to her, the one who came to pick her up?
I think it's difficult to tell someone who says they've been raped in the way that she explains it, that they haven't been. So I can't necessarily question her truth. I think it's important to note that those around her who she named that was also involved in or supported her during this tough time.
The case gained widespread attention after allegations of assault and abuse were made against Diddy. These claims have sparked a wave of additional accusations, shedding light on a larger issue of power, intimidation, and secrecy within the music industry.
They don't remember the situation. And so I think that those raise flags. But I also think that there is a lot of struggle with memory. And if we're talking about drug use, and like I said, we're talking about temporal lobe issues, then we are talking about questionable memory. How much do you remember? How much can you say was fact versus how much is maybe vicarious trauma? And what vicarious trauma is when you've heard the narrative so many times that you begin to believe that it's your narrative, and you will take on these feelings, beliefs, and ideas as if they're yours. And I think with all the other things she has going on, those are things that will come into question if she was someone that I was seeing. Not necessarily questioning her truth about being raped, but I would definitely explore all those possibilities.
And how about the passage of time here? We're talking about 24 years later, right? This goes back to 2000. It's 2024. Going back 24 years to remember something that happened to you when you were 13. How accurate would you expect those memories to be?
I think when it comes to trauma victims, 20 years ago feels like yesterday. So I do think that there is some details that they will remember. They will remember scents. They will remember sounds, voices. They will remember all that as if it just happened yesterday. So I don't think that the time frame of it all, plays a huge factor. Now, I do know that there are some clients who will block things out, but the minute you start unraveling, it will come to them with such clarity. So I don't think that 20 years ago makes any difference to a trauma victim, because to them, it feels like yesterday or like they're still in the moment. And that's what hypervigilance is.
And is there any way from your perspective when you're talking to someone to work through to figure out what is an actual memory versus what is perhaps, your mind playing tricks on you or some impact from the trauma itself? Is there any way to peel back any of those layers, or is it just is what it is?
No, I have many tools that I use to peel back those layers. I definitely create trauma narratives, or I allow the client to create the trauma narrative. I do dissect what they've been watching, who they've been speaking to, what they've been listening to, because sometimes those things can come up in the narrative or in the story. And so I have to help them pull apart what is real versus what they feel. And those things prove to be pretty successful with most of the clients that I've worked with.
Prominent figures, including Jay-Z, are now facing accusations of using their power to suppress these claims, sparking discussions about how far influential individuals will go to safeguard their public image.
Jay-Z's attorney says the sexual assault claim against the hip-hop mogul is false. A woman has accused Jay-Z of raping her at an after-party for the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards when she was 13 years old. But attorney Alex Spiro says the allegations are, quote, all a fantasy. CNN's Elizabeth Wagmeister has the latest from New York.
Jay-Z's attorney is doubling down on a denial that his client ever raped a 13-year-old girl. Now, Jay-Z has already fiercely denied these accusations, and his legal team has already asked the court to dismiss this case entirely. But now, for the first time speaking to reporters since these accusations came out, Jay-Z's attorney, Alex Spiro, held a press conference of sorts. There was a private meeting at Jay-Z's Rock Nation offices in New York City where CNN was invited to watch a presentation put on by Jay-Z's attorney, where he had a PowerPoint where he showed different details that he says disprove Jane Doe's case. Let's take a look at some of what he said.
This is not an account of inconsistencies. I wanted everybody to understand that this never happened. This is completely false. You have to look at the timeline. You have to look at the timeline. So there's an old expression that time doesn't lie. Everything else that I'm talking about, these glaring inconsistencies, these are not minor inconsistencies. These are not minor problems with this story. This is utter falsehoods. Time never lies. And so if you look at the time, no matter what, this couldn't have happened. It's not even possible that this happened.
Now, as you heard there, Jay-Z's attorney saying that these aren't just inconsistencies in Jane Doe's case. He's saying that the entire thing is false. In fact, he says it's not even possible that Jay-Z was there. Now, if we go back to Jane Doe's,
Tony Busby alleges that Jay-Z's legal team is aggressively trying to undermine his client's case by filing a Rule 11 motion, a tool used to penalize frivolous lawsuits. This tactic, he claims, is designed to discredit the plaintiff, push for a quick dismissal, and shift focus away from other allegations involving Diddy.
She alleges that she was raped by both Jay-Z and Sean Diddy Combs at an after party for the MTV Video Music Awards in the year 2000. Now, this after party, she said, was held at a White House that was outside of the city. Well, Jay-Z's attorney actually showed photos of Jay-Z that night at an after party, but it was in New York City. So he says, if you look at the timeline, it's not possible that Jay-Z was in the suburbs at this alleged after party because he was photographed being somewhere else. Now, in her initial complaint, Jane Doe also said that she got to this alleged after party by getting into a limo from a driver outside of the MTV VMAs who said that they worked for Sean Combs. Well, today, Jay-Z's attorney is saying that's not possible because the limousine line was barricaded by the police and fans were not able to access it. Now, I reached out to Jane Doe's attorney. His name is Tony Busby. He says that he is representing over 120 accusers of Sean Diddy Combs. This is the first accuser to come forward and name Jay-Z, but he tells me that he stands by his client. He says that they are still vetting her, but when I asked about the vetting process, here's what he told me. He said that 4 individuals at his firm interviewed the client and checked details. He says that a background check was run on Jane Doe and that his firm actually engaged a seasoned investigator to vet some details she disclosed to us, and he said, quote, those results were consistent with what the client had told us. He also says that she has signed 2 separate affidavits, and he tells me, quote, courts exist to resolve factual disputes. Our client remains adamant about her claim.
Busby has responded by dismissing these tactics as baseless, accusing Jay-Z's team of trying to manipulate the legal process.
Jay-Z is standing his ground after the Alabama woman who recently filed a rape lawsuit against him and Sean Diddy Combs addressed the inconsistencies in her allegations. The rapper, whose real name is Sean Carter, calls out her attorney for submitting a, quote, false complaint against me in the pursuit of money and fame. As Carter tells E! News in a statement on December 13th, this incident didn't happen. True justice is coming. We fight from victory, not for victory. This was over before it began. His attorney, Alex Spiro, adds to the statement, it is stunning that a lawyer would not only file a serious complaint without proper vetting, but would make things worse by further peddling this false story in the press. The women's attorney, Tony Busby, told NBC News that her case was previously vetted by another law firm and that his firm does their, quote, best to vet each claim they make. In the lawsuit, the woman alleges that Carter and Combs sexually assaulted her in 2000 at a New York after-party for the MTV Video Music Awards. She says in her filing that she ran to a nearby gas station after the alleged attack and called her dad for a ride home. However, in an NBC News investigative report published December 13th, her father said he does not recall picking her up following the alleged incident. Furthermore, a celebrity the woman alleged to have spoken to at the party told NBC News that he was not in New York at the time. And while the inconsistencies does not necessarily mean the allegations are false, the woman said in a December 13th interview that she, quote, may have made a mistake in identifying. Adding, honestly, what is the clearest is what happened to me and the route that I took to what happened to me. Not all of the faces there are as clear. Still, the woman stands by her overall allegations, with her attorney Busby saying that it's possible her father misremembered the night in question. Telling NBC News, his daughter explains that he was in no state to remember during that point in time due to personal issues he was having then. We are talking about a time frame more than 20 years ago. Meanwhile, an attorney for Combs, who's been accused of sexual assault in over 100 civil lawsuits, has said that the rap mogul maintains his innocence. Sharing in a statement to E! News on October 1st, he cannot address every meritless allegation in what has become a reckless media circus. That said, Mr. Combs emphatically and categorically denies as false and defamatory any claim that he sexually abused anyone, including minors.
The core of this legal battle is Jay-Z's Rule 11 motion, which aims to dismiss the allegations against him. His legal team argues that inconsistencies in Jane Doe's statements undermine her claims, insisting the lawsuit lacks merit.
Jay-Z is staying on the offensive, going after not only the attorney who filed the rape lawsuit against him and Diddy, that would be Tony Busby, the attorney, but also the accuser. And he has filed a new motion this morning, which we're going to get to in a moment, but basically he wants to level the playing field with the accuser. But first, we got to start with this response that Jay-Z had to the allegation. Catch you up real quick if you hadn't heard, but a woman who had filed a lawsuit against Diddy back in October, alleging that he had raped her at a VMA after party in the year 2000 when she was only 13 years old.
Right. Remember, this is when she allegedly was given a drink. She felt woozy, and there was Diddy, and there was a male celebrity who was unnamed at the time, and also a female celebrity.
Well, that unnamed celebrity is now named. She refiled the lawsuit on Sunday. She and her attorney, Tony Busby, refiled it and named Jay-Z as the unnamed celebrity involved in the rape. Jay-Z's response is extraordinary in that, look, we've seen all these lawsuits against Diddy, dozens of them now at this point, and frequently his response has been to deny it, but to say nothing else. Jay-Z went way more than just denying it. He did do that, but then went directly after the attorney. Part of his statement said, "My lawyer received a blackmail attempt from a lawyer named Tony Busby. It made me want to expose you, Tony Busby, for the fraud you are in a very public fashion. So no, I will not give you one red penny. This lawyer, who I have done a bit of research on, seems to have a pattern of these types of theatrics. You claim to be a Marine? Marines are known for their valor. You have neither honor nor dignity." There were other shots at Tony Busby in his statement where he called him an ambulance chaser in a cheap suit.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, and if you've heard Tony Busby's name before, it's because seems to always find his way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but he seems to always find his way into the big case, Charles, right? I mean, if it's Travis Scott, if it's Deshaun Watson, the NFL quarterback, he's always involved.
So Jay-Z had that strong response.
Yeah.
Tony Busby isn't backing down, and in fact said that he denied that there was any extortion. He said, my client merely reached out and wanted to have.
Tony Busby points out that inconsistencies in Jane Doe's statements are common in cases involving trauma, especially when the events occurred decades ago and involved a minor. Research indicates that memories of traumatic events can be fragmented and difficult to recall in a complete or linear way.
A confidential mediation.
Right.
Now, I got to say, I don't know what that confidential mediation would be about other than money.
Right.
But his point is the letter itself did not make any request for money.
Right, though I'm sure that was coming.
Yeah, it sounds like Busby's response was a little bit disingenuous. The confidential mediation would be where they would broker a settlement and not have the issue go public in the way that he did. He also mentioned that Jay-Z has sued him, and that got us thinking. There was a lawsuit, an anonymous lawsuit filed against Busby alleging extortion.
Back in November, yeah.
That's right. And now Jay-Z, in his recent motion that you referenced earlier, has said, yeah, that was me. Because when you sent your demand letters to me, I then went forward, stood my ground with an extortion lawsuit against you. And now if you're going to continue this whole spectacle, I want the accuser's name out there as well. She shouldn't be able to sue me as a Jane Doe. He says, fair is fair. This is a response to, this is retaliation for me standing my ground when you tried to extort me. And now let's just get it all out there.
Right. So the follow the beats here. First, Diddy is sued.
Right.
The unnamed celebrity. And at the time when we covered that, we thought the fact that they didn't name this person sounded like they were probably reaching out to that person to try and get a settlement. Right. Jay-Z says that is exactly what happened. And when he turned him down, he thinks that the only reason they have now refiled this and put his name in there is retaliation for Jay-Z suing Tony Busby for extortion. So this is going around and around, but a very strong denial from Jay-Z.
It is, and it's look, we've seen, and not just in this Diddy situation, we've seen a lot of cases in the past where celebrities have been accused of wrongdoing. This hardly ever happens, Charles, where you see the person under fire, the celebrity, fire back and this intensely.
Right, back at the attorney and then filing Derek this motion for the accuser.
Right, he is not taking this lying down, clearly.
And look, you're allowed to file documents anonymously, particularly where there's allegations that she was only 13 when this happened. So that's not uncommon to see. But Jay-Z now thinks this is an extortionate plot. And he says, in order to unearth all of this and unmask it all, we now need to know the identity of that person. And since it happened in 2000, she's obviously of age now. She's alleging that she was 13 in the year 2000. And he's saying we need to put all our cards on the table. I need to be able to identify my accuser and actually fight this lawsuit on its terms, on its face.
Yeah, I think it would be extraordinary, I think, Derek, if the judge did force the accuser to, because, and this is the really alarming part of this case, is that we're talking about a 13-year-old is the alleged victim, a woman who was at the time 13. And by the way, Tony Busby isn't backing down, said that his client remains steadfast in her resolve in this case, that she will not back down and that she is going to continue to seek justice. So
legal precedents have shown that exact dates and times may not always be recalled accurately in such cases, and this does not invalidate the claims.
It's going to be interesting to see what the judge says here, because we did see the judge demand that in one of the Diddy cases, the accuser be revealed.
It was actually Evander Kane, the NHL star's ex. I understand it, Charles, from the standpoint, it's like, how do you defend yourself? And this is not a criminal case, fine. But how do you defend yourself in a court if you don't know who's making the allegation against you?
That's the argument that Jay-Z's making.
Marta Shea from Montreal. I mean, guys, who is really surprised by this, right? I'm not. I don't believe anyone else is. Jay-Z and Diddy go way, way back. Decades, right? They've been friends since, 1990? That's about 30 years of solid friendship. It was only a matter of time before Jay-Z was also accused of such crime. Now, whether it's a plot or not, whether it's true or not, we can all agree that this is the fastest we've seen Jay-Z respond to allegations or accusations. He did not take this lightly.
Yeah, and it's very clear he also saw it coming.
Yeah.
Right? Because he knew that he got that demand letter. He had sued Tony Busby. This was not something that suddenly popped up on Jay-Z's radar.
Past legal cases have shown that it's common for people to forget exact dates and times, and this doesn't weaken the validity of their claims.
Everybody knows in the backdrop, Sean Carter, that you promised the South that the next time the Super Bowl came through, it would be a Louisiana affair. And then when Diddy goes and gets into trouble and you need to convince the white people you're still in control, you bring Kendrick Lamar, who we already know you don't like for the way he embarrassed you on Don't Kill My Vibe, the remix. But we also know
Up in the closet.
you got ties in TDE, Sean Carter, and you got a switch on top. I know that. I know that for a fact. Just like why you keep having artists that want to jump off of high places. Shout out to Ab Soul. What was her name? Alori Joe?
Oh.
That woman threw herself from a control tower and impaled herself with spikes right before she was about to sign the TDE. And her fiance, Ab Soul, threw himself off the freeway out of grief and survived.
Mm-hmm.
Why are all of the artists at TDE so unhappy? You got some of the best artists in the West there. Why did Kendrick Lamar feel the need to leave and start his own? And why is he able to release more records now that he's not at TDE?
So
interesting.
Let me ask you, as you're on this topic.
I tell you one thing, Curtis Jackson, you are a setup king. And I promise you this, any little nigga that you're enlisting to go down to New Orleans and start trouble during the Super Bowl, that will stop. That will stop. I'm sick and tired of you. And the truth is, they only like you for your money.
So let me ask you, Jack, on a surface level, you're saying that Kendrick being in the Super Bowl versus, let's say, Wayne, which...
Busby has highlighted the significance of the 21-day safe harbor period, giving parties time to respond to objections and make any needed changes to their filings.
For the city, that in the background, and again, we talked about the mayor, it's a lot more to it than just as simple as, oh, Kendrick's he had a great year.
Social engineering. Creating an issue that didn't need to be an issue.
I hear that. Like Hunger Games, like.
Very Hunger Games. Life imitates art. Art imitates life. I tell you one thing, it's been almost 30 years since Biggie and Tupac were taken from us. That was social engineering at its finest. It got people in line, didn't it?
Without question.
Now you think about Drake right now, and you think about Kendrick Lamar. That's looking about the same as Biggie, Kendrick. Biggie, Kendrick, Tupac, Drake. Think about the comparisons.
Yep.
Imagine. Be a gangster playing. Imagine.
Comparisons.
If the same fate that befell Biggie and Tupac happened to Drake and Kendrick.
Just imagine.
And as messy as Drake is right now, I can almost bet that there's somebody that wants to turn his faucet off. Because if y'all think Diddy is a mess, Drake, he was being groomed to be next in line. See? What happens when the real details of what happened to Triple X come out? What happens when Jonathan Hay finally starts putting all of the pieces together on why he was put in that home invasion robbery with his daughter? Because he's remembering more now. He's been talking with Truth Is here on YouTube, and he's been saying even more now than he said here. Shout out to Jonathan Hay and your bravery
Shout out Jonathan Hay. We will get him on the couch soon because his story is one of those stories that might get lost in Hollywood if he was ever silenced.
Might get lost. He might get lost.
Exactly.
Let's make sure he doesn't.
Yeah, let's pray and protect Jonathan Hay.
He criticized Jay-Z's legal team for attempting to skip this process by setting a one-day deadline, calling it both wrong and without legal backing. Busby argued that this strategy is meant to intimidate and put unnecessary pressure on the plaintiff and her legal team.
A lot of people trust in you to guide them, to educate them on the industry, what goes on in the industry, how people who are in the industry move, and how people who are interested in being in the industry should move.
Mm-hmm.
What methods do celebrities have when it comes to silencing people who speak against them? What are some of the tools that they use when people are filing these lawsuits? We've seen it several times where lawsuits come about, but they're dismissed over weird reasons before they even go to court. And there's enough lawsuits over the years that, I mean, I'm pretty sure you could build a mansion. And what are some of those tools that celebrities use to kind of, hey, no, this ain't gonna go the way you think it's gonna go?
The internet is the most effective these days.
Oh, wow.
You can pay a group of internet stalkers relatively small amounts of money to stalk your enemies. Somebody should talk to Candy Burris about that. Yeah, I got stuck with some of her trolls after she finally tanked on the Real Housewives of Atlanta. They was here looking for money and so they just jumped over to the Jaguar, right? Hate train. Because they didn't have they wasn't getting paid to hate on Portia and them no more, and Nene no more. It's disgusting. They use bloggers to throw rocks so they can hide their hands. And then, oh my God, I don't understand. Like that bullshit. But the worst is they find 10 people around you. Some of them you'll work with, some of them you'll be friends with, some of them are in your life. Sometimes even your spouse. If your spouse is not your partner or your teammate, but your opponent. And all they have to do is promise them this, promise them that. You don't know how many times people like Jay-Z have gone to women like Khalees